Hey everyone, Editing Jenny here with a couple notes before the show actually begins. The first is that this is a spoiler cast, so please be aware we will be diving into everything to the moon. So if you want to go in with no spoilers, just wait until you finish the game. Second thing is we are so excited for you to listen to this conversation. The audio situation was a little bit wonky. That will be remedied in future episodes. So just bear with us for this first one as we are getting our feet under us. But I hope you enjoy the conversation. I know Joel hopes you enjoy the conversation. And let us know what you think in the comments or in the Discord forums. All right. Have a good time. This is always the awkward part.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Okay. Hello. Welcome to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games together and brew good conversation.
Oh, that's very good.
Hey, I'm so happy. It's the only tagline I've ever come up with that I'm just like, I'm gonna roll with it because I don't do taglines. And the fact that it happened made me happy.
I'm still percolating on.
Yeah. See, I think that's what our Twitter handle said for the longest time. It's like
No.
percolating will arrive like spring 2021, fall 2022. And what season are we in? Winter, spring 20.
Winter 23.
We did it though.
We've made it.
We've
back.
made it. Cheers. Welcome back.
Cheers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
For everyone who is fresh to the podcast, to the video, or to us, my name is Jenny.
Joel.
And we're here to guide you through games each month. We're going to have conversations, but really the hope is that you're having these conversations with us either through the newsletter, through the Discord, and by listening to this podcast, hopefully this will help you articulate your thoughts a little bit more. Quick note, I noticed, I think your knee may be shaking the camera, so just be aware.
And I'm like a leg shaker for sure.
If you need to, feel free to like put your legs up on here. It's dirty because I have spilled coffee and wine and shoes on it, but you can.
The more I'm shaking, the more I'm really thinking about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's almost like a tick for me. I
Yeah.
can't stop.
Well, that's very random classroom story.
Yep.
Because we both have been classroom teachers before. I had read an article like early on in my student teaching days about how especially guys and like male students would be the ones where to shake and to move around really helps them pay attention. And so as a teacher trying to, and now we know that like all students, have different ways to help them focus, and it's not just male students or boys, but what's really interesting is that fidgeting is something that helps focus. And so as teachers, you're not supposed to just be like, stop fidgeting, don't move your chair. So that was like a best practice thing.
Oh, I love
so
that.
That's why I'm like redirecting from the table to like, you can use the stool here.
The next time my partner and I are at a movie theater with seats connected and I start shaking, I'm just going to lean over and be like, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
You should appreciate this about me.
I'm really trying to pay attention here.
I'm being thoughtful.
Yeah, exactly. So with Geeks and Grounds, we have the geeks parts kind of covered. We've talked about how we're playing games. We're going to talk about them. We're going to connect them to other forms of media and activities. So it's not just about the game, but it's about how we bring it into our lives and bring it into sort of a deeper level of understanding and connection and literacy. Again, teacher nerd talk. I'll try to keep it at a minimum. But there is the grounds part, which is right now we're drinking some coffee. I'm going to let Joel introduce the coffee, but before that, I just want to say the inspiration for the coffee and the grounds is because I really love the atmosphere of cafes. We've spent a lot of time in cafes, and something about it, like you can sit in a cafe or coffee shop by yourself and feel totally comfortable, and like there's an atmosphere to it, especially in like really solid cafes. There's an atmosphere where you feel just like productive and calm and relaxed, and but you can also go there, and often I go there with friends to like catch up and take time to talk.
Right.
So I don't know.
I'm right there with you. I think that was during the panini times and shutdown. That was Absolutely one of the most missed things, and I can't tell you how many people were constantly sending me like, "Hey, here's cafe sound background music, and here's a
Oh my
virtual cafe to sit in,
god.
and here's how you can be at a conference as a little digital avatar and feel like you're surrounded by humans." I It was one of those one of the things that was like I did not suspect I would
Yeah.
miss so much, but like kind of this ambient human connection is something that was yeah, it was a tough thing to lose. So
Yeah.
this is a great opportunity to kind of bring it back, make us
Mhm.
like re reinvite ourselves into that space.
Yeah. And so each month as we're doing this podcast, we are going to bring a beverage of choice. And Joel brought this month's beverage. So if you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yes. So we are in the Portlandish area, and on the north side of Portland, there is a coffee shop called the Great North. And I popped up there today to grab a bag of coffee and found out that they had just started roasting their own beans a week ago.
That's so cool.
So yeah, like feels like yeah, this is a sign we're going the right place. So
Yeah.
this is La Bendicion. It is a Nicaragua blend and has notes of panela, blackberry, and caramel.
Ooh.
And we did percolate this particular blend here, and we're enjoying. Is it? What's the taste for you? Is it
Yeah,
good?
I like it. I think it's like really light, which is really cool. Like it's not too heavy or dark of a roast. So I prefer like a medium roast often, and that it doesn't feel
Mm.
like a dark, heavy roast.
Yeah, I've moved towards lighter roast myself
Hmm.
lately, and for me, it's like if I can get a hint of that coffee cherry flavor, that's how I know I'm
Yeah.
like really sipping something tasty. And this
Yep.
is freshly ground, freshly roasted, really really great flavor. So if
Heck
you find
yeah.
yourselves near a Great North coffee shop, I think there are two of them in the Pacific Northwest. Check it out; it's really tasty.
That's cool. I don't think I've been there, so I'll have to actually take a trip over and stop by.
Yes.
And what's really nice is we encourage you if you don't like coffee, grab boba, grab tea. I'm a London Fog fan myself, so you don't have to drink coffee, but we just both enjoy it very much.
Yes, I definitely think we should branch out and do some tea sessions this
Yeah.
time around. I
Oh
think
my
that'd be a lot
gosh.
of fun.
You know, there are some like games with a lot of focus on tea now, which is really cool. So I could see us playing a game in the future with like a tea focus and being specifically like, let's do tea for this game. Like really, really go next level with the curation here.
I think that's great, like a full sensory experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm all about it. I was previously part of a dance company, and that was one of the goals that we had was, like, when we had shows, before you enter, like, to the auditorium where you sit and, like, actually watch the show, you have, like, some sort of actual experience to sort of prime you as you come in, and so in that, we had, like, questions and things for people to eat and, like, things to look at and ponder, and, that's honestly one of the sort of inspirations behind Geeks and Grounds too and how it's formatted, because I am very much like, "Oh, we should engage as much of our senses as possible," so.
Yeah, and maybe, like, talk a little bit about the format, like, what are we going for here?
Oh, that's a great segue.
Perfect timing.
I was like, "That's
It's
really
been
good."
a while since we've talked about
It
this.
it has, and to be honest, it's a format that's still, like, this is the first month, this is the first podcast, we're still figuring things out, this is just something I was like, "We can't sit on it any longer, we just need to do it," and
Mhm.
so we'll do it, we'll figure it out as we go. Um, the format. Okay, so every month we will select a game, we'll curate a game for you to play as a community. Um, every Tuesday, we are going to get a newsletter if you sign up at geeksandgrounds.com. And I highly encourage you to sign up at geeksandgrounds.com. And when you sign up, just put in your email. We're not going to do anything with it except send you something on Tuesdays. And the newsletter on Tuesday will, at the first of the month, talk about the game and why we're playing it, as well as provide the first set of discussion questions. And each week, you'll get another set of discussion questions to help guide you through sort of specific sections of the game, as well as, and this is the part that I'm like, what's the value proposition? If I
Mm,
was the
mhm,
marketing
mhm.
person, what's the difference of this versus any other like book club? And the hope is that with each Tuesday newsletter, you also get a few supplementary resources. So, things that don't necessarily connect directly to the game all the time, but are tangential to some of the themes or some of the activities, or maybe encourage you to try a certain food in the game. So, things that kind of ask you to maybe go a little bit further, but to hopefully, in a positive way, deepen your experience.
Yeah, like
Think.
building little connections to other things in the world. Like, I'll
Mhm.
tell you one of the things that was really exciting for me. We also have a Discord that is
Yes.
under. You
It's
do
under the Kimchica's Cafe handle.
so strongly recommend you check that out. And the newsletter is a great way to like get introduced to all of this at one place. Um, One of the recommendations for this
Mhm.
week's game was to watch a movie, and it was one of my favorite movies of all time. And I didn't know that you were going to be recommending it.
What? Oh,
And
snap.
there were people that were like, "I've never seen this before," in the Discord talking about it. And so,
Mhm.
like, just having the opportunity to share something that it was particularly like meaningful to me
Yeah.
with this new community that we're trying to build up, it was really exciting. So, like,
That's so cool.
yeah, so we're getting like the sensory experiences. We're going to try and find connections, and then these additional resources are,
Mhm.
great ways to also like further your engagement with the
Yeah.
material for the month.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Discord. So one thing that I always get when I'm also, like, wanting to join a club or join a group is I want to participate to different degrees, to put it
Hmm.
mildly. Sometimes I just want to, like, take on the knowledge from this community, but not necessarily be an active vocal member of a chat room or a Discord or server or anything. Sometimes I want to participate a bit more actively. And so our hope is to make sure that if you are someone who just wants to play games and just have that guidance and not necessarily join like another Discord server
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
hang out, every month, that's totally fine. Engage with the newsletter, respond to us, which is great because we love getting the responses. But that could be it. Just sign up and just enjoy the content that we are able to provide and the scaffolding. If you do want community, though, if you want to share this experience with others online, we have the Discord and we have a monthly hangout in the Discord where, for just an hour on the last Saturday of the full week of every month, I swear it makes sense. It's the most consistent way to, like,
Yes.
organize the thing. Um, but yeah, the last Saturday of the full week of every month, we just hang out for an hour and just talk about the game. Um, I also was thinking my dream scenario, honestly,
Oh.
is if folks take the newsletter and go to their friends and are like, "Hey, we should do this together. We don't join the Discord. Let's just like have our friend group do it." And if you all just like, even if I just got one email that said our friend group is all subscribed to this and we we don't chat in the Discord and we don't email you, but we all do this together. That's like my dream scenario. And if anyone ever does that, please let us know. Cause yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, as two former teachers, this is something that we're
Hmm.
really passionate about, is kind of empowering people to get engaged with this for themselves and within their own communities of friends. So Jenny, for this month, really thoughtfully prepared a lot of questions around the game that we're going to be discussing. And I think my hope would be that as we release these types of questions, you all could discuss them with your friends and go to a coffee shop yourself if
Yeah.
possible, have these conversations, and you're enabled to do that without having to listen to a podcast or having to do the Discord.
Yeah.
You could be totally just like a solo flyer and pulling these resources down, and that's totally great.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is so in every newsletter, there is a weekly question. And the very first newsletter that you get when you sign up is, oh, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but I think it's like, what are you most excited about and what are you most
Hmm.
apprehensive about?
Hmm.
And I think what has really struck me is everyone says that they're excited to be able and to have the facilitation to think about something they love a little bit more deeply. And I think that made me really excited to see just everyone universally, they were just like, "Hey, I love video games. I would love to think about them a bit more critically with a bit more intention and play." Um, yeah, again, with more purpose than simply just to wind down at night. Sometimes that's great, but I find that I crave more.
Mhm.
So it's nice to hear others do too. And one of the biggest apprehensions most folks did mention is that ability to sort of stay accountable and participate consistently.
Right.
And so that's why one of the reasons we have so many different facets, which can feel perhaps overwhelming at first, but I'm hoping that it allows people to understand that sometimes you can participate in, or anytime you can participate in different ways that best fit your needs and schedules. Yeah,
Yeah, it's real life choose your own adventure, right?
exactly.
You
Yeah.
open the email, turn to page 62. Oh, you died. Go back to go back to the start of the book.
You will not die though if you open an email. This is not like a death note moment.
Okay, yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. I should I'm gonna
Fair
walk that
warning.
back.
Fair warning. So, yeah, I think I don't know, is there any other stuff like housekeeping wise, since this is our first episode in many, many years.
Years.
Is there anything you wanted to share? Maybe what you're excited about or apprehensive about?
Yes. So I think the concept of like a video game book club isn't like a revolutionary idea,
Mm,
but the idea that you can do it at your own level of engagement, involvement, pace is something that I'm particularly excited about.
mhm,
I am very much like a casual gamer. I love playing games that are being discussed in
mhm,
like pop culture, TikToks, or where have you. Um, and it's easy for me to feel overwhelmed. And I don't know if you
mm.
ever get the thing where it's like your friend's like, "Oh, you have to read this book, or you have to watch this movie,
Yeah.
or you have to play this video game," and your first gut response is, "Don't you dare tell me what to do." So I think just like having a thing that's like, "Hey, we're over here. We're doing this, and
Yeah.
here's some questions, and we'd love for you to engage, but you don't have to." I don't know. For me, it's kind of like
Mhm.
the best way to be like introduced to something that might not be on my radar otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, and what's kind of nice is that, while obviously I hope that everyone is able to participate sort of in conjunction with all of us, I think what also is really cool, and again, another dream scenario is that like the playthrough guides are going to be online. They're going to be pretty evergreen in the sense that like even if, you join, I don't know, months from now
Mhm,
and
mhm.
we haven't played to the moon since this point in time. You still could say like, well, right now they're playing, I don't know,
Mario
Mario
64.
64, and I don't wanna play Mario 64, but I noticed they played To the Moon, and I kinda wanna play that, so maybe I'll just, like, this month not do what they're currently playing and just play a previous guide. Um, I say, like, go for it. So, yeah.
I say I'll just caveat, I don't know that we have any intentions to play Mario 64.
Who knows? Never say
I'm
never.
I'm not saying never,
Yeah, never
just
say
yeah.
never. Honestly, I don't know if I could play Mario 64 because I feel like it's probably way harder than I remember.
I went back in the first month of the panini and played Mario 64 on Switch, and it was so hard because of the camera movements. Like, on 64, you
Yeah.
move the camera with, like, the C buttons,
Mhm.
and on Switch, it is the same, like, you're using buttons to, like, move the camera around, and it
Yeah.
was such a hard experience. I was like, "Man, teenage, middle school Joel could have run circles around 30-plus-year-old Joel for sure."
Yeah, I have gotten worse as a player. Although I am playing Elden Ring, and that has like built up my confidence like nothing else has. Is playing Elden Ring.
Yes, I could talk about this game for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna get it started, but I will just say I'm playing with my brother right now.
Oh.
I have not gotten to play co-op, and this
Yeah.
game's now it's about a year old.
Yeah.
And playing with a friend and just like goofing about, it's
Mhm.
so much fun. And it's like I haven't played video games co-op with another person in the same room
Yeah.
in so long. I don't know. It's just been really nice.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. I love that. Gaming bringing families
Yeah.
together. Oh, so speaking of just bringing people together, we've brought everyone together here today
Oh.
to talk about To the Moon. You came prepared. I did not come prepared.
This is not true.
Joel was prepared. would you be able to introduce folks to sort of just the general summary,
Mhm.
like, of To the Moon?
Yeah, so, by prepared, I copy and pasted the intro from Wikipedia, so we're gonna give full credit to Wikipedia for this.
Mhm.
But I do think this is a really great, two-paragraph synopsis of the game, the developers, etc. To the Moon is a psychological drama adventure game developed and published by Freebird Games. It was originally released for Windows in November of 2011, with ports later being added for Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, Nintendo Switch. The story follows two doctors who offer to fulfill a dying man's last wish using artificial memories. The game features relatively few gameplay mechanics, with the player controlling the two doctors, exploring the narrative and solving puzzles as they try to reconstruct the dying man's memories in order to fulfill his wish. The game was designed by Can Gao. Have you looked up how to say?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm pretty sure that's how you say it.
great. Using the RPG Maker XP toolkit, developed started in 2010, when Gao was struck by questions of mortality following his grandfather's life threatening condition. To the Moon would become Freebird Games' first commercial product, following smaller experimental games released for free on the studio website. The game was updated later to include free download content called Minisodes, which we'll probably talk a little bit
Yeah.
about. Um, this game received a lot of praise at the time, and I think one of the things that's going to be interesting to explore is this game that was published in 2011. Um, we're going to talk about places where maybe the language is a little bit controversial for how they talk about things,
Mhm.
and we want to be very conscious of that
Yep.
as we dive in. So
Yep.
I'm sure we'll get there. But one of the things that's particularly interesting is that these two doctors work for Sigmund Corp. They use technology that can create artificial memories. Since they conflict with the patient's real memories, the procedure is only legal to do on comatose patients without much time left to live. Thus, they offer this as wish fulfillment service to people on their deathbeds.
Oof. That's
Oofa.
yeah, Hoopa is right. What did you think when I guess because when you have not played the game prior to this. This
This
was
is
your
my
first
first
time.
playthrough. Hmm.
What did you think when you, like, maybe went to the Steam page and picked it up or, like, to the Switch store, and picked it up? Like, what were your first thoughts?
Um, my first thought was the current Carly Rae Jepsen song. It's like something to the moon, and that's what I was like. Okay, yeah, we're Carly Rae right now. I played on Switch, and this is a lot of firsts for me.
Mhm.
This is probably the closest I've ever come to like a point and click
Mm.
gaming experience.
Mhm.
I've done a lot of like visual novels before, but where it's like, hey, like there's something in this environment you need to find and interact with. It was a first for me. So the
Yeah.
mechanics were different, and I have some interesting, fun stories about the puzzles as well. But how about you? What were some of your first impressions? Obviously, like this is not your first playthrough.
Yeah, so I've played this game multiple times over the years. I think one of the reasons why I picked this game in particular is because when I played it for the first time in like 2011, it was one of those games that, like, I can tell you absolutely changed my life in the sense that it made me interested in games again.
Mm.
This was a game that I played right out of, like, college, I think. I don't know. I was just, like, in a time where everyone was playing, like, Destiny, Call of Duty, Gears of War, and I was thinking, like, I think games may not be for me anymore. I think just no one's really making, like, the RPGs I'm really enjoying. We were in kind of a little bit of a dearth in terms of, like, sort of story epic adventures, and so I was like, I don't know, I might not be a gamer anymore.
Mm.
And I was looking up Harvest Moon, seeing if it was on PC, and it was not, which is fine because I discovered To the Moon, and I was like, you know what? At the time, it was like on sale, and so I was like, I'll just buy it, whatever. It's relatively cheap, and it looks cute. And I played it in one sitting and just like was bawling by the end. And I was just like, what just happened to me? What is this experience I just had? And where can I find more? And that's
Mm.
how I started getting into indie games.
I'll just do a quick plug.
Mhm.
If any of you are looking for game recommendations, the Kimchica channel on almost every social media feed is a great place to go. I was in a similar kind of slump. Like, I think I got
Mhm.
into Skyrim after college.
Yeah.
And after that, I was just like, okay, a lot of these games are feeling a little lackluster. I've never been like the Call of Duty type
Mhm.
person. And I think as I started, like, getting to know you and learning about indie games, I didn't know what they were. I think
Yeah.
Braid was the only game that I had ever heard
Yep.
of. Um, I found, like, a whole new world of games that I really enjoy that didn't
Mhm.
require I was teaching at the time. I was working, like, 80 hours a week, and so it
Yep.
was, like, trying to do video games on top of that is, like, mentally a killer. So,
Yeah.
like, I think I owe a lot to you to introducing me to these indie games. So, if you're all looking for something recommendations, it is a great place to go. So check out
Uh,
the socials for
g
Kimchica.
good mid-pod plug.
Mid pod plug.
Um, um, what I think is interesting though, to answer your actual question about like, what is it like to revisit it? I think we'll get into it when we get into sort of the chronological order of playing the game and what the narrative is about.
Mm,
But it was interesting because I still feel very strongly that this is a game that people should play, but I feel very strongly that this is an imperfect game and it needs to be contextualized and it
mm,
needs to be actually like critiqued and critically examined in a way that I think when people think of criticizing or critically examining a game, you're thinking of like, oh, I'm just going to tear it down. And I think this was a really interesting pick, almost inadvertently, because the more I played it, the more I realized I was flexing skills and enabling hopefully others to flex the skills of like being able to enjoy something but also understanding where it needs to grow or where it just has not aged well.
mm,
And I think especially now in 2023 there is a lot happening in terms of how are we going to consume media that's older, how are we going to address media that we create that may have aspects that aren't so great. And I
mm.
think this was actually a really interesting like case study in doing that. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested to see as we kind of get into the conversation and start hearing from people and their responses to the forums, etc.
mhm.
Kind of how they engage with those moments where it's like it's clear that we don't really talk about these things like this anymore, and like we have as a culture kind of progress. And I'm
Yeah.
really interested to see how people engage with that
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know, I think you wanna start at the beginning?
at the beginning.
Let's go.
Yes.
So we start the game and we we start with a crash.
Yep.
This literal car crash that we begin the game with, and we meet 2 characters, Ava and Neil.
Ava and Neil.
Yeah, how did you feel about them as we really got to know them as they were making their way to their patient's house?
Yes. And I think they set you up at the beginning. I think Neil is kind of a whiny smartass, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
And I think he kind of fulfills that consistently throughout the game. Ava
yeah.
seems very much like the one who is in control, the driving force of a lot of the action that you're
Mhm,
experiencing.
mhm.
And you get to choose, right? You get to choose which of the doctors you're
Yeah,
going to play as. And we learned in our intro conversation that we both played
yeah,
as Ava,
yeah.
which I think that's really interesting because we don't know if the story is at all different if you play through as Neil.
Well, and I don't think the core of the story is, but I do think there's a really interesting moment at the beginning of the game where you get to pick between who has to stay and set up to get ready to go and dive into this patient's mind, and who gets to explore the house.
Mhm.
And we both picked Ava, and as Ava explores, we see these 2 kids that are like, what are they?
Creepy ghost children.
Creepy ghost
They're
children.
not literal ghosts. They are creepy and they are children.
But they're like the kids of, I think, the
Yes.
housekeeper who's
Yeah.
helping Johnny out, I think.
Mhm.
And the kids guide for us, it was Ava, and I assume it's probably the same as Neil, if you're playing Neil. They guide us to this lighthouse. And in the lighthouse, our character discovers something. And did you wanna dive into do you remember this part
Oh,
or
maybe why don't you go for it? I'm
yeah,
not
okay.
sure.
Because at the beginning, you go and you discover the lighthouse, which ends up being this like really central, pivotal space for the couple, Johnny and River, later in the game. And then you go up the stairs, and it's just like filled with these paper rabbits.
Mhm.
And what I thought was interesting, because again, we played as Ava at the beginning. Ava, as a character, is the one that is more methodical and puts things together a little bit more. And I think having her discover that made sense to me when we played the story,
Yep.
and I would be really curious because I've never picked Neil in my playthroughs. I'd be curious to see how it feels to pick Neil and have him be the one to discover it and see how things fall, because if the events are the same, I think it adds this just like different context.
I 100% agree with that. Like, there is a cohesion to the story as a whole when you play through as Ava. And what's, I think, kind of doubly interesting is there's a post-credit scene where you are Neil. Like, Neil is the focus of the post-credit scene.
Yeah.
And so it kind of shifts, and I think it forces you to kind of ask questions around, like, who are the protagonists of the story? Who are the driving, like, I'll
Mhm.
use the word antagonist in like the classic literary sense. Like, who is the character that's like creating opposition or struggle within the story? And I don't know. I could really make an argument for either as you play through the plot.
Yeah. I love that. I love yeah, it's because, so often when I think about To the Moon, I think about Johnny and River, and we'll talk a little bit more because we haven't introduced Johnny or River yet,
Hmm.
but, I think the more we play and looking at the way the IP has kind of grown with the developer and the studio, Ava and Neil certainly are, like, at the end of the day, the main characters, and you're seeing this, like, story through the eyes of them and through the eyes it's like 6 degrees of separation
Yeah.
that you're, like, getting the story, which I also think is kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, I think this is actually a really good point to tie to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is the
Yeah.
movie that was recommended as part of kind of the opening and announcement of this game being selected, because that movie is structured in a similar way where you are following the personal lives of the employees of this company essentially that
Mhm.
are tasked with going into people's minds. But the story of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is still very much focused on Joel, the main character,
Yeah.
and Clementine. And so I have no problem distinguishing like who is the main character of Eternal Sunshine. It's Joel and Clementine.
Yeah.
This game takes the kind of the inverse look though, where you're like it would be like
Yeah.
as if Joel and Clementine were like the side characters, and as if the workers of this at this like memory company were the ones that are the main characters,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting dichotomy in my
Yeah.
mind.
Oh man, I have to say I loved that you watched the movie, because part of me was like, I hope someone actually watches the movie, because I stumbled onto this movie as I was just doing some side research for just materials for this game, and I had never seen the movie before.
Mm,
And so I thought the exact same thing when I watched it. I was just amazed at some of the parallels that I saw, and I highly recommend anyone who hasn't watched the movie and enjoyed playing this game watch the movie. There's some really cool connections and um like dichotomies that you can really address when you compare the two.
I'll just put my one little like asterisk caveat for like how things have aged and haven't aged well
Yes.
for this movie is like the movie definitely suffers from that like early 2000s like manic pixie dream girl
Mhm.
phase. But what's smart about it is that the male protagonist that is played by Jim Carrey, uh, you do not follow him and think that he is like a good dude. Like, you don't look at his life and think, oh,
Mhm.
this is the character that I want to emulate. You look at him and see, like, oh, I see how he was like objectifying her from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that's another really interesting parallel for the story. Should we introduce Johnny and
Yeah,
River?
we should. And I want to say, okay, see, okay. So what I think is really cool is about Clementine in Eternal Sunshine is she explicitly says, like, do not do this to me. Don't do it. And I think that's what
Mhm.
made that movie stand out compared to like a Garden State or,
Yes.
any number of the movies that came out at the time,
Hmm.
because even though that trope is still there, that was maybe the first time I've seen a character like explicitly state like I know what you're trying to do. She's telling this to Joel and to the audience, because we're watching this, like, kind of romanticizing this whole thing. And I thought that was really cool, especially compared to Into the Moon, where River does not necessarily have that opportunity to say that. And so I will pause this. We're going to stop this because we need to introduce Johnny and
We got
River.
to talk about
We
him.
have to talk about who they are first.
Okay, so we'll start with Johnny
Okay.
perhaps because
Yeah.
this is the character that you meet first and is kind of the central the orbit around which we spin this story,
Mhm.
or the central point of the orbit.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what the word is. I'm not a science person. Um, we meet Johnny up in his bedroom in this
Mhm.
mansion, which is by this lighthouse. And our two scientists, they walk into the front door, they make their way upstairs, and we see
Mhm.
Johnny on presumably his deathbed. He's hooked up to a heart monitor. The whole time you're playing the game, you can access like a quote live feed of Johnny laying in real life on
Yeah.
his deathbed, even while you're like in his memories. Um, and what we're trying to unravel is why Johnny has made a wish to this company that makes
Mhm.
wishes come true, at least within our minds, that he wants to go to the moon.
Mhm.
And before they can make that happen, they have to understand why. In order to appropriately adjust the memories and
Mhm.
make him feel like he's gone to the moon, the two scientists have to understand why.
Right.
And so through this, we work backwards through Johnny's memories from starting as like an old man all the way back into a child until his childhood to understand what is motivating this wish to go to the moon. And he's essentially relatively nonverbal at the beginning of the game. He can't tell you why he wants to go to the moon, why this was
Mhm.
his wish. And as you get into it, you realize that he couldn't tell you even if he was verbal, which is a
Yeah.
whole interesting layer to all of this.
Yeah, what's super fascinating is, so again, Ava and Neil, they put on headsets and you start the game by jumping into his sort of latest, most recent memory.
Hmm.
And in it, Ava and Neil actually talk to like a memory version
Hmm.
of Johnny,
Yep.
which I also thought was really interesting, because Johnny himself is like, oh, like, did I already call you? And there's like, no, actually we're here because now it's time. And I thought that was really interesting because again, it's like this idea of just sort of agency and memory and like who are you and who are your memories and like what does that mean for yourself? I don't know. So that was just like really interesting, and we will come across another scene
Yep.
later where Neil talks to like memory Johnny again,
Hmm.
which I thought was
Hmm.
really poignant and, like, sad, but also it just had me conflicted. Um, but we as we move backward through Johnny's memories, we experience his life, and so we learn that he is married to River, who is a big part of his life because, they're married, they spent most of their lives together, and you are introduced to River when she's actually almost ready to pass away, and they don't really say specifically why. They allude to, like, maybe cancer. It's a terminal illness. It's
Hmm.
something that
Hmm.
they have the ability to cure, but it will cost a lot of money. And instead of taking the cure or wanting to get treatment, River says, "I don't want this. I just want you to finish the house." And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the concept of agency is like a really important theme all throughout.
Mhm.
And we when we step into the very present of the story, the two scientists that crash on the road and make their way to this mansion in the lighthouse, and they meet Johnny on his deathbed. River's been gone for
Yeah.
years at this point, right? And I think the question is like, if you don't know, or if you're not able to communicate why you have this dream to go to the moon, we
Mhm.
we can't actually make it happen. And so I think there's a question around agency there, where it's like, well, do you actually have control over this
Mhm.
experience? I think you have this question of agency again when it comes to how he's engaging with River, and
Mhm.
um, I think it's worth we probably bring this up now. Like the
Yeah.
way there's kind of a paternalistic way that he approaches the relationship. Like he acts almost more like her parent at times than like
Yeah.
a romantic partner. And this is perhaps a little too deep, but I think this is one of the areas where the game has not necessarily aged well.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, I think this question of agency is not only important for the game, but also the players. Like we end up feeling that some of that same frustration, especially in the end game.
Yeah. Well, and also as we meet River, and we go through, we also see them dating. We
Hmm.
see them also addressing the fact that River, and we should probably, like, this is also a big part of knowing River, is that she's on the spectrum. They don't specify much more than that in the
Hmm.
game, but we're also like, we have a character who has autism in some form, and so that informs just like Johnny's treatment of her, or
Yes.
maybe some of the ways that he doesn't address treating her,
Hmm.
in terms of like how he interacts with her. But what I think is really interesting, and upon this playthrough especially, is that all of our experiences of River are through Johnny's mind. And
Hmm.
so anything we know of her, any interaction they have, you have to imagine is like tinged with whatever he recalls it as. And perhaps that's not how River would have recalled any of it. And so
Yeah.
you're always, at least I was always left curious as to, are these, how accurate are these memories? How much is like, is this reality versus Johnny's perception of reality?
Yes, and we probably should mention this, but like this podcast is going to be filled with spoilers. This is kind of the
Yes.
summary of.
Yeah, this is absolutely the spoiler
I think
cast.
we've been talking in more general terms, so we're going to get into a lot of specifics
Yeah.
going forward. So apologies. I think it's really interesting this element of like how much of this is truly Johnny, like is objective reality versus how Johnny just remembers things being.
Right.
Because as we learn, his memories have been tampered with
Right.
since he was a child.
Right.
Um, and the way that he has perceived River, their entire relationship, especially as some of the, we'll say, like quirks that she adopts,
Mhm.
is that they are all a result of her condition, is what they call it. Her
Right.
condition, her condition. And what we learn as the game progresses that no, like all of these things are actually about him.
Yeah.
And he never realizes, like he never has a conscious realization of that. Only our doctor main protagonists
Mhm.
are come to this understanding.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's absolutely wild. Um, I guess just to stay relatively chronological, so we can also bring listeners and watchers to the similar conclusions and sort of thoughts that we had. I guess what was the do you recall the conversation between Johnny and River, and then there was like Nicholas, who is Johnny's best friend, and I think Isabel,
Isabel, yeah.
and they were all in the restaurant together, and, I think that's when you first, like, really are aware of, like, River's condition, and Nicholas and, Johnny talk about it, and I was wondering if you remembered
Yeah,
that.
I don't remember the specifics outside of it seems as though like they're concerned about River, right?
Mhm.
And like how is that her condition affecting her? And um there's definitely this sense that Johnny is almost playing the victim in a way. I don't know if you
Yeah,
picked up
yeah,
on this at
yeah.
all or felt the same way, but like as I listened to it, it's like it sounds like you are unhappy with something about this relationship and you are putting it on her quote condition
Mhm.
rather than doing any sort of like real introspection. And it seemed like Nicholas was that the friend's
Yes,
name was
yeah.
reinforcing that rather than doing any sort of like critical friendship exercise.
Right. I thought it was really interesting because that was also one of the first times, as well as the time when like they're at the doctor's office and learning about River's condition, and Johnny was like, I don't want to read about this. Like he just
Hmm.
straight up told the doctor, no, I'm not
Yes.
going to learn more about this thing that's really going to be integral in helping me understand and better communicate with my wife, my partner, my fiance. It's like, what? And just, and we're both to different people married, and it's like that's unfathomable to me.
I cannot think about that as a reality.
Yeah,
It's
like
shocking.
if anything happened to like Sam for me, and the doctor said, read this so you could like know a little bit more about how things are going to be moving forward and how you
Mhm.
can help. There is no world in which I would say no.
Absolutely. And as a longtime participant in therapy, the idea of like curiosity being one of the keys, fundamental keys to being a human, and
Mhm.
his lack of curiosity in that moment was just completely like startling for me.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm like, I guess maybe perhaps if we're giving him the benefit of the doubt, it's like the shock in the moment. Maybe later, he finds ways, but you don't really get a sense of that ever.
Mhm.
And so that's why I was curious, just because I think River and Johnny have a really interesting relationship where clearly he cares for her. Like every key memory of his
Mhm.
life involves River, but there's this disconnect between the ways that they communicate with one another and the ways I feel that he relates to her. And I found myself continuously asking, like, are you in love with her? Are you in love with the idea of her? Like, what is happening? And this goes back to that manic pixie dream girl
Mhm. Mhm.
um, trope, because she does have those quirks that, which is really fascinating. I've seen on TikTok a lot now. This, like, they call it like the manic pixie dream girl to autism pipeline, because there's a lot of connection between
Mm.
like the sort of quote quirks of someone who has autism, that you can see in this manic pixie dream girl trope. And so a lot of people who are like on TikTok are commenting like, "Hey, you are romanticizing this thing about me that's not meant to be romanticized."
Yes, and what's interesting is, I think the game has commentary on that, despite that not really being a conversation in 2011. Like,
Right.
throughout 90% of the game, you don't know what drew Johnny to River to begin with, outside of like a brief flashback where it's like, yeah, she seems kind of mysterious and different. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, mysterious and different is like classic manic pixie dream girl, like bait scenario. But at the end, like we learn like the actual motivation behind their interest together, and it really like turns it on its head and
Mhm.
shows like what a shallow way, like even his understanding of his own attraction to River.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess if there's any, because we're pretty much in act
Yeah,
1.
let me throw a quote out from this scene that you were
Yeah.
just referencing.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
in this memory that Jenny was just talking about, like it's kind of on a double date, right? Like Johnny
Yes.
and River are at this, I guess, coffee shop or something like that,
Yeah.
and then Nicholas and Isabel are their friends and also there. And Isabel has this line, and I took a screenshot of it because I thought it was such an interesting. It ended up being pretty meaningful.
Yeah.
Um, Isabel says, the Isabel that people know, the Isabel that people know of is all an act, and the real me has long become a stranger.
Yeah. I know. I was like, Isabel coming in with like as VIP this scene. Like,
the heat, the heat in that line.
yeah, honestly, I think Isabel had another line in like maybe act 2 or later on where I was just like, who are you, Isabel? Like, you deserve your own game at this
Yes.
point. Um, yeah. Well, and I think Nicholas also had a moment, and I think this maybe was in act 1 as well. But this was maybe closer to childhood. I think they were in high school. Maybe it seemed like high school. And Nicholas, and this is the mysterious moment that you were talking about. And River is sitting on the steps with
Mm,
a platypus and is reading a book, and she's reading about lighthouses, and that's such a weird stuffed animal, a platypus. Why do you have a platypus? And you don't really know why, and she's pretty reticent to talk, and she's just like, I'm just, I'm being mysterious, according to Johnny.
yep.
And they go back to the cafeteria, and Nicholas straight up asks Johnny, and he's like, what do you see in her? Like, I find her boring, which I'm like, okay, Nicholas, that's a little mean. Come on. But he's just like, what do you see in her? And Johnny says something along the lines of like, she's different. She like, I forget if, oh, and I should have screenshot. That's smart that you screenshot it. But he says something along the lines that made me feel like his complex of feeling the same as everyone else, and he sees her, and he sees her difference and her
Hmm.
specialness,
Hmm.
and he's like, basically he just wants some of what she has. And Nicholas straight up asks, like, how do you think she feels? Do you think she wants to be different? Like, do you think if she is different she desires this? And like, what does that mean if you like just that about her? And I think he asked something along the lines of like, do you like her, or do you just like that she's different? And I was like,
Hmm.
dang, Nicholas.
Oh
Wow.
yes. That's so good.
But at that point, we've been going through these memories. Ava and Neil are trying to figure out where's the moon in all of this?
Yeah.
What's going on? There's nothing. We've been to a wedding, we've seen some lighthouses, a lot of paper rabbits. The platypus is
The
everywhere,
platypus is everywhere.
which is like, okay, cool. It's a quirky animal for a quirky person. But we don't, nothing about the moon, which is weird. But then something happens and they're unable to get any further. You know
Yeah,
what?
there's like a schism, right? So
Mhm.
they've gone back into like childhood, like elementary age period
Right.
in Johnny's mind, and they're trying to get to what looks like a backyard, and there's like
Yeah.
this schism in the memory, and they can't quite get there.
Yeah.
And so they have to go back to the present, right, and try and unlock a bit more. And I think this is the big dividing line in the game,
Mhm.
because this is where everything changes from. It's like the unreliable narrator element that you were bringing up earlier.
Yeah.
Even as in high school, Johnny doesn't know why he's into River, and it just seems like, well, because she's different. And as an audience, we have to just be like, yeah, that must be it.
Yeah.
That we don't know any other reason why they could possibly be into each other, and we certainly still know nothing about this moon. So what's happening here? Um, do you want to talk a little bit about like how we unlock this memory and the implications of it?
Yeah. Are you talking about like the memory?
The memory.
The memory. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what happens is Ava and Neil are stuck and they're just like, we need to like get out of here. We need to take off the headsets and like regroup. We only have a limited amount of time before Johnny passes away because he is just at the very end.
Mhm.
Um, but we don't know what to do. And when Ava and Neil go out, and I think you were Ava as you're
Yeah.
exploring,
Yep.
Ava goes out like back to the or no, just leaves the house maybe and smells just the roadkill
Yep.
that Neil hit when they crashed the car on
The
their way to the
opening
patients.
scene.
The
Yes.
opening
Oh, such a
scene.
good tie-in.
Oh my gosh. And so she smells the roadkill and makes the connection that there was a scent of roadkill in that memory where that schism was present.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the conclusion that she comes to is okay, one of the things, and this is kind of what I love because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're all about like multisensory experiences here. And
Mhm.
it's like one of the ways to connect a memory and reactivate it is to provide a multisensory experience. Smell puts us in a place and time immediately if the memory is strong enough and the like emotion to it is strong enough. And so she bottles up the
The
scent of
scent. The scent
roadkill
of roadkill.
and she goes back upstairs to try and activate this memory in Johnny.
Right. And this is also when we learn about his medical history, right? Like
Yes.
Neil's on the phone. So like while you're going out and getting the perfume of roadkill,
Ode to roadkill.
ode to roadkill. Neil is on the phone with the company that they work
Mhm.
for, and they get access to his medical records, and they learn that he has been on beta blockers since he was a child. And so this is not just like a natural occurrence that he doesn't
Mhm.
have this memory. There is a medical or the medicine that he has been on for all these years is actually a contributing factor to this. So they have to
Mhm.
hotwire him. They have to jumpstart his
Yeah.
memory
Yeah.
to get past the beta blocked schism and see if they can put the final pieces together.
Yes. And so they waft this scent, this perfume in front of him, gets get back into the headset. And they witness a memory that's absolutely heartbreaking.
Mhm.
Did you want to dive into that one?
Oh man, this was such a hard moment. Okay, so you start off where you left off in your last kind of run through. You're in
Mhm.
childhood, Johnny's house. His mom is there. You go into the bedroom. You start seeing some interesting elements in the bedroom if they're looking for
Yep.
some clues, and then they force their way through
Yeah.
into the deeper memory of like maybe like 4-year-old, something like that, Johnny.
Yeah.
And he's on his neighborhood street. You start seeing another like a copy of Johnny. And my first thought, I'm not sure if this was intentional, probably was, but that is that you're seeing like the memory is still kind of broken a little bit.
Yeah, yep, that's what I thought
That's
too.
not what's going
Yeah.
on. Unfortunately, what you're watching is Johnny and his twin brother playing as
Mhm.
children in their neighborhood area. And then this heartbreaking moment as the mom leaves with her car and
Mhm.
we assume backs over Johnny's brother Joey.
Mhm.
Um, and that moment was so hard to watch. Like you hear these stories of these
Mhm.
types of tragedies happening, and like watching it in a video game, even this like 16-bit video game experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. How did you feel as you were playing through that moment?
It's heartbreaking, and it's, like, almost even more effective in the sense that, like, you see the moment right before, and the screen cuts to
Hmm.
black, and you just hear the sound,
Hmm.
and so, really, your imagination fills in all the gaps,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly hard because you realize now, throughout all of Johnny's memories as he was going through adulthood, like even at the wedding, you learn that his mom always calls him Joey.
Hmm.
And Nicholas even was like, "What's up with that, my dude? Like, that's not your name." And he was always told, like, "Oh, that was my grandpa's name. Like, just calls me by my grandpa's name for some reason."
Yeah.
You're just like, "That's a little odd." And his mom seems a little off, but you're just like, I don't know, maybe your mom is just a little odd. And so we realized that not only did he lose his brother, but his mom felt that to protect her son, the most the best thing that she could do would be to remove memories of him and remove the existence of Joey and that day and whatever happened that day from his mind.
I just put these pieces together. You may have known this for years now, but uh as the scientist, you are doing exactly the same thing that
Yes.
his mom is.
Yes.
Until you just said that, I have not put those pieces together.
It's see, and that's why I'm just like, the mom's already doing what has already happened. Like, the mom is doing what Johnny is already requesting, and in some ways, you are like, Johnny is like and it's maybe too far of a stretch because he doesn't know this happened, but
Mhm,
there's this part of him that is trying to restore himself
mhm.
using the technology, that not the same technology, but using technology based on the fact that his memories were removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely incredible. This is why we discuss games like
This
this,
is why we
because
talk,
I did
yeah.
not draw that connection until just now. But yeah, like the mom has like obviously like she is fractured and hurt by this
Mhm.
experience. She's trying to protect her kid by removing the memory of his brother, so that there's less pain for the
Right,
child, and to like give him a perhaps better life. I think obviously
right,
that's her goal. She doesn't strike you as a malicious character, but that was what she did.
right.
And now what we're doing is we are playing as these scientists who have been paid by Johnny to go in and adjust his memory so that he could have this perception of a better life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's absolutely wild, and this goes to I we totally in the format of this forgot to mention the essential question, but I think this goes back to the essential question, which is, the core question that I hope everyone kind of keeps in the back of their mind as they're playing, and there are many essential questions that you could have about this game, but the one thing I think that this game for me asks is like how much do your memories actually shape who you are and your being,
Mhm.
especially when we're in a situation where Johnny has grown up and doesn't even realize that a huge core part of him in his through his memories have been removed. And
Mhm.
how has that changed who he is, but how has like the removal of that not completely changed him because there's still a part of him that has this feeling of there's something missing. He wants to go to the moon. He doesn't know exactly what's why, but there's this urge that he can't explain. So clearly removing the memories didn't change everything about him, you
Yes.
know?
I think this is it. Like, let's get to the big reveal,
Yeah.
right? Like, we, after getting past the beta block memory and we see what
Mhm.
happened with his brother, we jump backward in time a little bit further before the accident to a carnival.
Yeah.
And this scene, oh my word. Number one, I just took screenshot after screenshot of the dialogue because I was just sitting there weeping, and like my wife is on the couch next to me, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I am not okay. I was a wreck." because what's happening is you are playing through and like it's kind of a classic brother. I have two brothers myself, and it's like the
Mhm.
classic thing where it's like mom likes you better, and
Yeah.
yeah, and like you kind of get a sense that it might be a little bit true, at least from Johnny's memories.
Yeah.
But after kind of following Johnny through the carnival, he
Mhm.
goes up the cliffside. You start realizing the carnival is happening in the same general area that this mansion and lighthouse have been from the whole game. So they bought this mansion and put it in the same area as the carnival. And so immediately you're thinking, okay, this place must have some special significance.
Yeah.
But you haven't really seen it much outside of like the wedding and the present.
Right.
So you follow the trail, you go up the cliff, and you see the space where the lighthouse should be and where the
Mhm.
mansion should be. And they're not there. But there is the youngest version of River sitting on a log. And so
Yep.
remember, this is all like behind the beta blocked memories. Johnny as a in the present does not remember this moment. It's only these
Mhm.
scientists that are getting to experience this, right?
Yep.
So they come forward and they have this incredible conversation. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Excuse me. I wish I screenshot it, but I wish I had it accessible to me right now. So during the carnival, Johnny, I just want to note because
Mhm.
it'll become pertinent later in the conversation. Johnny has won one of the carnival games and has won something. So
Yeah.
there's that. But Johnny, does Johnny sit there first, or is River already there?
I can't remember now that you say that.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah, I'm
like
not sure.
maybe I can't quite remember, but they both end up sitting together and they're both little kids, right? And River talks about how she just doesn't like the noise and sort of everything, all the
Mhm,
people in the
mhm.
carnival. And Johnny just appreciates kind of having someone there just to talk to. And you get the sense that Johnny just appreciates also just not being under his brother's shadow a little
Yep,
bit and
yep.
like hanging out with someone and just having a little bit of a good time, not being a brother. And oh gosh, you might have to take this because you have the screenshots and I don't want to I want you to get into the details and I can add.
Okay, so I didn't my Switch is out in my car, so I don't have them in front of me. But you start I think the question that you posted in the chat and that I did
Mm-hmm.
take the note down is I've always thought they were lighthouses, which is they're sitting down on the log, they're getting to know each other. Uh Johnny ends up revealing what he won at the carnival and
Yes.
handing it over to River, and it is
A platypus stuffed animal.
yes. And so you realize this trinket that you've been using throughout the whole game to unlock and access memories. They
Mm-hmm.
even make a joke at one point, which is like, we can always count on the platypus
Yeah,
to give
it's
us one of
always
our
gonna be
things.
here.
Um, was in fact a gift from Johnny to River, and that he has no memory of this because this is
Yes.
all happening on the other side of the schism. He has no memory of meeting River in this moment because it's on the
Mm-hmm.
other side of the schism. He does not remember them talking about the stars and how they are all lighthouses. Uh, which again, the
Oh, I just got
lighthouses,
goosebumps on that.
the lighthouse is critical. They name it. They call it Anya. Like they
Yeah,
think of it as their child. So there's this connection to something deeper that he doesn't even know exists, like consciously does not know
right.
is there. Um, and one of the things that's so fascinating about this to me is talking about the stars as lighthouses. Like I think a lot of times we romanticize lighthouses, these like cute, cool things. Like this is my call home is the lighthouse. It's like
Yeah.
no, lighthouses exist to tell you where not to go as a ship,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so I think like there's such really powerful imagery here with the lighthouse containing all those rabbits at the very beginning that Jenny referenced. You follow kind of the
Yeah.
lighthouse from when it was first built, and that's where their wedding is, and all this. So I think there's something really powerful about it. And then you have the moment where they're looking at
Yeah.
the moon.
Yes. Well, they're looking at the moon and they've been discussing the stars, comparing them to lighthouses, talking about what it feels to be lonely versus,
Mhm.
having so many surround you. And they trace a shape in the stars and they include the moon. And the shape they trace is of a bunny rabbit and the moon is its belly. And
Yes.
they make a promise to one another. Oh, I'm getting choked up thinking about
I
it.
was too.
Uh, they
We
make a
keep passing it back
promise.
and
I
forth
know.
because
I'm
it's
like,
so
I don't
hard
want to
to talk
say it. I
about.
don't want to say it. They make a promise that no matter what, they will meet back at that space again, next year when the carnival happens. And then one of them asks, but what if we don't make it to the carnival? And the other says, well,
We'll regroup
we'll regroup at the
at
moon.
the moon. Oh.
What the heck?
And so now we're like, oh, I can check the plot box. I know why he wants to go to the moon.
Yeah,
And you would think like, oh, well, the story's over. We know why he wants to go to the moon. We
right.
know what happened with River. And you're like, wait a second, like the implications of this are huge.
Because it's never about the moon. It was never about the moon. It was always about River.
Hmm.
Oh,
And recapturing this thing that had been medically ripped away from him, this
yeah.
element of who he is and who his
Yes.
brother is.
Yeah. And Ava had this line when they were walking through the carnival, and Ava was like, all these memories, all these nice memories lost and never found. And I was just like, these memories of his life that were so positive to the core of his being that influenced the rest of his life,
Hmm.
he never got to remember.
Hmm.
And that's tragic. That's like the ultimate tragedy to me.
Yeah.
Because like he never fully got to understand like why he loved River, I feel like.
And he never understood the communication of the paper rabbits, which
Yeah.
we now know were her trying to get him to remember their
Mhm.
first meeting. And
Mhm.
it's not until that moment that you realize the significance of all of that,
Yeah.
right? And that again, like through his memories, it looks like, well, she's just making rabbits because that has to do with her condition. It's like,
Yeah.
no, this is about you. You
Yeah.
have lost something fundamental about who you are, Johnny. And River, this whole time, is trying to bring it back to you.
Mhm.
And like we read it as the audience, we see their memory where River is upset, is seemingly upset with Johnny
Right.
because of the first time they met. Nicholas kind of put him up to it or whatever. And so we think, oh, it's because she realized, classic she's all that scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's not that. She's not necessarily, we don't have any indication that she's mad at him,
No.
that she feels like it was a lack of genuine connection.
Yeah.
It is out of concern that like he has lost this thing and she did not
Mhm.
know that he had lost this thing.
Mhm.
Man.
Yeah, that was like yeah, that was just like tears for days. Like I can't, and the song that plays behind it, like I can't listen to that song and not cry. Honestly, it's just like it's just such a tragedy. Um so what I also think again is really significant because it feels very different in this conversation at the carnival is Johnny does mention when he meets River for the first time about how he's like, my name's John. It's the same as like a million other Johns out there.
Uh,
And like I love your name that's River because it's different. And for me, it the context of it is so different because you now know he's a twin. You now know he's like under the shadow of his brother a little bit, at least again, as far as we know from his perception. And this is what seems to be his first time all day being himself to
mm,
someone else who he like says, you have this name that makes you stand out. Like, that's really cool. And it feels so much different than the moment that you think is their first meeting
yep.
when they're in high school.
Yep.
And it totally changed it for me in that sense of like, oh man, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, it changed their relationship for me in terms of like now I can look at this game as a love story
Hmm.
a little bit more friendly and
Yeah.
like fondly. But it's hard because it's like if you don't remember that, what does it mean if you don't remember that, you know?
It kind of explains like why he's a bit patronizing towards her,
Yeah.
right? That like he doesn't have this memory of like why they're connected. He just knows that he's connected to her for some reason. So he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
understand this about himself either. And I think a lot of times when there's a lack of understanding about your own motivations, it's easy to project that as a fault onto someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's something that we're kind of seeing with the older relationship with River and Johnny is he doesn't know necessarily why
Yeah.
he's attracted to her anymore. Like, what is the thing that is keeping them together? She has the quote condition, and it is it it is just a shocking turn of events when you get to this moment and you realize that they have a much deeper connection than what
Mhm.
Johnny can know,
Mhm.
and that all of the things that he looked at as her being kind of quirky or weird or different,
Mhm.
so many of that is just like a part of understanding who she is and who she wants to be with him.
Yeah. But you're right that there is now a really big question because Ava and Neil know. They know that it is not about going to the moon.
Mhm.
But contractually, because they work for a company and there is a lot of legal stuff that they have to be accountable for, the contract says Johnny must go to the moon.
Mhm. So this is where we start getting back into that question of agency. So we
Yep.
both played as Dr. Ava,
Yep.
and my desire as a player is I want to have him remember his first memory of River. That's
Yeah.
the thing that I care about as the player.
Yeah.
But Dr. Ava does not quote care about that as far as you know when you start
Right.
playing through it, right? So she goes for the route of like, let's follow the company policy, let's
Mhm.
try and get him to the moon. And Dr. Neil, the whiny a-hole, is the no, like this feels wrong. Like we're taking something away from him rather than trying to like actually help him.
Right.
Um, and this was a moment where I felt like, despite me choosing Ava for my playthrough, I felt a loss of agency in the game, where it's like, well, I
Yeah.
can't do the thing that I want to do.
Yeah. I was so frustrated with Ava. And I'm like, I understand you have a job. I
Mhm.
understand you have a contract, but you know, Neil knows, you this is not what Johnny wants. You know that this goes against what he actually wants. And just to like dot some I's and cross some T's and like making sure your job gets done, like this feels wrong. This feels like almost unethical.
Mhm.
And what happens, and it goes back to the whole concept of this procedure in the first place. Like, what happens when you have people who are not even connected to you personally try to interpret your final wish? What does that even mean?
Ugh.
And so I found myself getting really frustrated because I'm like, Ava has been putting together all these dots through the
Mhm.
whole game. Ava knows. And Ava's so smart. And you know this. And so to know that Ava is unwilling to say, like, okay, we'll like bend the rules here. That felt really like I was unhappy with that as a
Yeah.
player.
It felt like you're being betrayed. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I was playing as the one who really cared,
Yeah.
because she's always going the extra mile. She
Yeah.
hangs back in memories. She
Yep.
tries to really get the context of what's going on in a way that Neil doesn't. And so
Yeah.
you think that like she's gonna be the careful one.
Yeah.
And then so this is the spoilers,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
here are the spoilers. She goes rogue and starts making changes to his memory, and you start playing as Neil and
Yeah.
trying to like stop her or slow her down or whatever. And what ends up happening is she reconstructs his entire memory path so that
Mhm.
he gets to go to the moon.
Which
Job
is
job checked.
which honestly, okay, this section, I think is like I struggle through this gameplay section every time
Mhm.
because the whole game is like this lovely, you get to walk around, just click on objects, you have puzzles, which we haven't talked about the
Yeah.
puzzles.
It's because
But
it's
the
embarrassing for me.
but the puzzles are once you understand them,
We'll get there.
they're not too bad. And, it's a really chill game. And then all of a sudden, there's this section where you're going down the hall as Ava's like changing up the memories. And as Neil, you're having to like dodge things. There are zombies that like come up, and you're just like,
Yes.
why?
Why this
Why
though?
is this happening? And like in the narrative, you're like, okay, it's because Ava's trying to slow Neil down so that she
Yeah.
can do her thing. But as a player, I was also just like, not only am I frustrated at Ava, but also this is like the worst gameplay portion of the game for
God,
me,
yes.
and I didn't appreciate it. So,
It's because you had to walk, and walking was one of the most frustrating parts of the mechanics of the game. We have a comment about this in the forum where I was like, I want to be able to move around in like a 16-bit game like this and have it feel smooth, like
yeah.
Zelda smooth. But instead, I can't even walk up staircases because you have to like they move at an angle, and so you have to like go over and then up and then over and then up and then over. It's like, what were you thinking? And so this final, after this incredibly emotional
Yeah.
climax,
The tears haven't even dried.
yes, you go into this weird zombie battle sequence. And what I will say is this, it does such a good job of distracting you from the ending that you get that it is incredibly effective. Because
Yeah.
I was so pissed at having to deal with this that with a twist, I didn't even come close to seeing it coming, which is,
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh. Okay. So I'll rewind. I'll go back
yep.
one half step because you, at the end of this horrible zombie dodge Indiana Jones sequence, basically, um, you have a scene where you go into these rooms and you see portions of river disappearing.
Mhm,
You see the memories that you've had
mhm.
disappearing. And so you know that Ava's making changes and that River is no longer a part of Johnny's mental
Yep,
equation at this point.
yep.
Like River is the life that they made. It's not there.
They set you up to believe that it is because of his relationship with River that he never got to go to the moon.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
what they
they
set you up
they
to
set
think.
you up to believe that yeah, that Joey's death and River both were contributing factors to him not going to the moon. And so Ava decides the change that needs to be made is that River needs to be removed and that Joey needs to be added in.
The prestige, Joey returns. And so I'm thinking at this moment,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I hate this. I
Yes.
hate that we are losing this love story that I have been invested in, and despite it being problematic, despite Johnny really like falling on his face consistently as
Yeah.
an adult through this, I was like, "Ah, it feels like such a violation to take this away, this memory
Yep.
away from a dying person."
Yeah. And well, and also because like at what points do people get to stay in his memory and be remembered, and what points do they not? And it's like, yeah, no one's like physically getting hurt, but there's this idea of like, well, with anyone who's left behind, um, from a procedure like that, like,
Yeah.
what is the effect?
Well, and if you were to say like, "Oh, I want to go to the moon," and no one told you, well, to go to the moon, you have to forget the person that you have been married to for
Right.
in a relationship with your entire life.
Yeah.
That's
It's
like,
like
well,
he doesn't have the opportunity to
I
agree
can't
or
change my
disagree.
mind, right?
Yeah, and like he never, I don't know, it feels also very wrong that he not only doesn't get to process the loss of his brother, but
Mhm,
his brother is brought back and he didn't even know he had one. And
mhm.
so it's like not only did you lose the love of your life, but you gain a brother that you didn't know you
You
had, but
didn't know
and
you needed.
yeah,
Yeah,
you didn't know you needed, and it's just like it's just so wrong. It just feels and I think is just so
yeah,
unethical.
yeah.
Um but then as Neil, you start going through the memories again
Mhm.
and you see him growing up, going to high school and not asking River out. You see him hanging out with Joey instead and hanging out with Nicholas. And you see him go to NASA and to train to become, or I guess whatever the equivalent of NASA is there. You see him train to become an astronaut.
And you get
You get little
little
sparks.
sparks of, that there's something that is not happening that Ava has planned,
Yes.
right? And you're like, "Well, what's going on here?"
Yes. And I don't know when this line happens, but oh, I think this is when everything is getting ready and everything is done and Neil and Ava are about to go through the memories to make sure this is happening according to plan.
Mhm.
And Neil asks like if you remove River, what's the point? And he said, "I signed up to help and die happy."
Oh,
And then Ava says this line that totally wrecked me because I was like, I can't imagine you saying this. She says, he can always find another river. he can never find he can't find another brother. And I was like,
Oh, I texted you when I got
"You
to that
did."
because I was a wreck. And when I got to that point, I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? I cannot. What do you mean? Like in a literal sense, he can always find another river, but he can't have another brother. Like this doesn't. It made no
No,
sense to me. I couldn't. I
no.
couldn't fathom it, and I was like, if this is how this game ends, I'm gonna be furious.
Yeah. Yeah, I had and because 'cause it's been a long time since I've played, and so I didn't remember any specifics like that, and so with that line, I was ready to throw my Steam Deck. I was just like, I can't do this with you, Ava.
Hmm.
I can't do this with you." And you're right that as we go through the memories, Ava is like, "Hey, this is successful, like, he's going to the moon," and Neil says, like, "This isn't a success. This isn't right. This isn't
Hmm.
cool."
Hmm.
But you're right that Ava keeps saying, "Oh, I thought
It should be
it should be
happening.
happening by now. I wonder why it's not happening."
Yep.
And as a player, you're just like, "What?
Yeah, because
Huh?"
it's like it's easy. You could assume like he should be on the moon by now.
Right.
And because time is running out, like the world is shaking. And so it's like,
Mhm.
well, maybe she's concerned because they're not quite to the moon.
Right. But then one day in Johnny's imagined NASA training, which again is hilarious. Part of me is like laughing because it's like Johnny's imagination of what NASA would look like, and they channeled that to make NASA. So it's like the most stereotypical. You're like, we've got the little spinny doodad, and
Yeah.
we've got computers, and
Yep.
it's just like the quintessential NASA, and I thought that was hilarious. But then one day on training, River walks in, and you see that all along Ava had banked on the fact that in remembering that promise that and we'll dive into this because I think there's a lot to unpack here, that in their memory of promising to go to the moon, that River would also Memory River would also go to the
Hmm.
moon, and that Johnny would insert River into his memories of going to the moon.
They were going to regroup there, right? Like that was the
Yes.
language of the memory of the
Yes.
goal. That was why he wanted to go to the moon. And Ava unethically pulls through.
I'm like, you got lucky right there. I feel like this was the wrong thing to do. We like got the right answer in the wrong way. And I honestly don't know if this was even the right answer because once again, we're in a situation where this isn't River. What does it mean when your supposed memory isn't even real at this
Hmm.
point?
Yeah.
You're not remembering the wife that you had cared for and loved like over all those years. This is your fantasy of River right now. And that almost takes away some of like the love the foundation of it being a love story for me and turns it into almost more of a tragedy.
It turns it into a commodity. Like it
Yeah.
turns it into a product, which is what these two scientists ultimately are doing. They are
Yep.
making something that is being sold, right? Like
Yep.
Johnny paid for this service.
Yeah.
Mm.
Damn, that's good. I never connected that dot, and that is like
You know what you
explosions
just
in my
connected to
brain.
me is it reminds me of Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my
So
gosh.
Jenny and I saw this in theaters. I think I saw it 3 times in
Yeah,
theaters.
we saw it twice
We saw it
together.
twice
Yeah.
together. And there's the whole like there are a million lines that you could pull with the line where like
Yeah.
in another life I would have been perfectly happy
Doing
doing taxes
taxes
with
and
you.
laundry.
Yes. Oh my god. And it's like it's kind of that same thing because what you see is Michelle Yeoh like playing out entirely different versions of
Yeah.
her life.
Yep.
This is kind of like a almost a bastardization of that idea in
Yeah.
some ways
Yeah.
because it has been commodified.
This is why we have these
This is why we do
conversations.
it.
This is why we do it. This is why we do.
I can't sing anymore. I've
Oh
paid
my gosh.
royalties.
No, no, no. Yeah, we don't want to be get copyright strikes. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So we played through the whole thing.
Yeah.
We see this moment after they go to the moon, which is kind of a really cool thing, like seeing the liftoff from the bridge and like you're
Right.
with the friends as a scientist
They
and
hold
the
their
third. Yeah,
hands. Yeah.
exactly. Really cool. We then watch them play through their romance. They get older together, they get married, and all of that happens. But it again, because it's a commodity, it feels cheap.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel as real. You don't have the paper rabbits, right? Like you don't have River spending so much of her adult life actively trying to help her partner heal from something he doesn't know is broken
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
hurt. And so in that way it feels like a commodity. It feels cheap as compared to the real thing.
Yeah.
But it is a way, like I don't know how else you could possibly end this game than say like,
Yeah.
we have given you the romantic connection with your lifelong partner and you get to go to the moon. So like I don't know what else they could have done.
On paper, it looks great.
Yeah. They've checked the boxes.
Check the boxes. Again, I just think back to Johnny's mom and how she thought taking away this tragedy
Mhm,
would give him a better life and make him happier.
mhm.
And it's like, is he really, it's like ultimately at the end of this, he passes away. But is he really happier? And maybe he is. Maybe that is like what he wanted. He wanted to just die with this happy memory. I mean, he paid for it, but I don't know. It just makes me so sad that like he felt the need to go through and God, there's too many layers. There's too many
You
layers.
never talk to adult alive Johnny,
You never get to experience him.
right?
And what we didn't talk about this, but Neil talks to Memory Johnny. And Memory
Yes.
Johnny asks a question of basically like, am I what am I? Am I not real? And this is Memory Johnny. And so then you get this whole like there's the sentience that's still there. There is Johnny that is still there.
Mhm.
And like, even though he is in this more comatose state, like he's still alive and
Yeah,
he's not able to actually comment on any of the things happening within him.
yeah. There's no customer satisfaction survey at the
No,
end of
you
this.
don't know if he's actually happy. And I think
Yeah.
that's where I struggle is because, he paid for this thing and, kind of like when his mom removed his memories, he's like, I think I'll be happy if I do this thing because they promised me happiness. But you don't know if he actually really got what he wanted from it.
And in some ways, it's like what's the ship of Theseus
Mm-hmm.
paradox, right? So if you're not familiar with this, the idea is if you took the ship of Theseus and put it in a museum, over time it would rot, and the museum would replace planks.
Right.
And it's like, well, how many planks do you replace before it's no longer the ship of Theseus in this museum anymore? And that's kind of the question that I was left with at the end of this game. It's like
Yep.
you've so fundamentally changed this person's life and experience. Like,
Yeah.
is it even the same person
Yeah.
anymore?
Are you still you if your memories aren't your memories?
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh,
Should we talk a
yeah.
little bit about the post credit scene as like the biggest
Yes,
mystery
because
for me?
you brought it up to me and I must have just put it down when the credits were playing and just like let it play and didn't even look at it really after it. And so I did not remember this and then I did not experience it until you showed it to me today.
So if you played through and you did not watch post credit scenes, it's on YouTube. You can find it. It's like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And you are back at the top of the hill by the lighthouse, and you're
Yep.
at the grave marker for Johnny and River, and you are Neil. And
Our favorite.
our favorite. And there's kind of some interesting moments with him and the family.
Mhm.
But the thing that was so like, what is happening here is the very last thing that happens is the screen flashes red like twice.
Right.
Neil gets these three dots that like dialogue bubble dots, and then the game goes black. And it's like, I just realized this is about the same time as Inception came out. Like, was this like an Inception call out? Or were they trying to make it feel like, oh, it's the end, and like, did we ever actually escape the memory? Is this real? Is
Right.
this real life?
Yeah.
I saw some theories online. This is connected to like one of the mini episode things,
Yes.
that maybe Neil had like a pain prescription drug problem,
Yeah.
and maybe it was something to deal with that. But like, it is an unanswered question as far as I could tell, and afterwards.
Yes. So I can illuminate a little bit of it. I For folks who've played To the Moon, if you get it on Steam, there are 2 minisodes that are also available with your purchase. If you play it on, I think, Switch or mobile or anywhere else, I don't think they are, which
I
is
didn't
really
see it on
unfortunate.
Switch. Yeah.
That's really unfortunate. But these minisodes illustrate life for the doctors, from my understanding. It's been
Mm.
a very long time I've played. I don't remember what the minisodes are, but they do delve into the lives of Ava and Neil a little bit more. And you're right. One of the theories, and I think they dive into it in the minisode, is that Neil does have some sort of like substance abuse or drug problem. And they slightly allude to it in this game, where there are moments where Neil, he acts a little bit strange, like stranger than normal for Neil.
Mm.
Where I
Mhm.
think there's this one part where the housekeeper or the woman who's like staying at Johnny's house is like, "Are you okay? What do you need?" And he's like, "I need to take a leak." And he runs outside. And you're just like, what are you doing, man?"
Oh.
And then he runs into Ava, who's outside right about to get, I think, the roadkill.
Uh-huh.
And Ava's like, "What are you doing?" And he's just like, he says something very off,
Yeah.
like weird, like, "I'm gonna go play Tamagotchi or go play a game," like something
Yeah.
very odd.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think part of that is alluding to him, like, trying to find somewhere to be by himself or something. You just know something's
I bet
off.
you're right. Mhm.
And that goes and kind of speaks to the greater world that the developer and the studio is building, where I watched in an interview, he talked about how he wants games in this universe and to kind of follow, there's going to be a numbered sequence, so there's a To the Moon 1, there's going to be like a 2 and 3, and
Mm.
each of them will deal with a different patient, but you will follow the doctors throughout, and you will follow, maybe sometimes not the same doctors, but they'll come in and out, so you will experience the world of like this Sigmund Corp
Mm.
sort of what is it, career
Mhm.
almost, and you'll see it through the lives of each patient. And then there are other minisodes and other supplementary games that are going to happen that kind of add layers to that. So I think that's kind of what they were alluding to in
Interesting.
building.
Okay.
Which now, gosh, they have maybe 3 games out now.
Oh,
I think it's
really?
like To the Moon, Imposter Factory just came out, and I think, let me just look it up because we have our phones here. Um,
To the Moon
to
2.
Yeah.
Too much, too furious.
Let's do To the Moon, I'll say sequels. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Good idea.
They're titled differently. I think one is a bird story that's not maybe directly in the same universe, but is by the same developer. Um, Finding Paradise, that is the sequel to the Moon, and then Imposter Factory is the third one that just came out like last year,
I
I
saw someone
think.
post about that on the forum.
Yeah, and I have not played Imposter
Me neither.
Factory, so um yeah, so there's a lot to dive into. So we have gone through the experience. We've gone to the moon. We've come back again.
Come back.
Um, what did you think about playing this game for the first time?
Uh, for me, this is like the perfect game to begin this whole experience with. Like, there's such a. I did a significant amount of personal reflection. I think you posted some questions around like the relationship with between Johnny and River. Made me think about my relationship with Lee, my wife. So, from a personal reflection perspective,
Mhm.
very rich game. Conversational perspective, I love this. I think there's
Yeah,
so much
this
like
is
you've
great.
made me think of in this very moment. There's just like so much to reflect on. I'm gonna just share one moment of Joel being a casual gamer that probably didn't affect anyone else. I was on maybe like the fifth puzzle, where you're trying to like put together a little image as a puzzle. And I played for probably an hour trying to resolve this puzzle. I was up to like 90 flips. I reset 80 flips and I was not getting there and I couldn't. I think it was like the flower vase or something like that. And then I slept on it and the next day I got back in and I was like, I accidentally clicked the little circle button in the corner of the puzzle, which
Oh,
flips the diagonal pieces, and I didn't know you could flip the diagonal pieces, and from that point forward, I was always within, like, 1 or 2 of the, like, fastest ways to solve the puzzle.
well, and for folks who may not recall or anything, the flip puzzles generally are solved in like 3 to 6 flips.
So I'm up to like 80 plus, and reset another 80 plus. Like I was like, I don't know what I am doing wrong. Like I was at the point, like before I went to bed that night, I had gotten online and I had
Yeah.
gone to walkthroughs so that I could be like, okay, I'm gonna just find this stupid puzzle and I'm just gonna solve it tomorrow so I can get on with it. And it's just like it was like one of those things where like someone is like, oh, you're not using like the X button, and that's like the key to playing this game.
Did you turn the switch on?
That's how I felt in that moment. So hopefully none of you experienced that particular challenge. But otherwise, like from a mechanics perspective, I enjoyed my first
Nice.
point and click game. Visual storytelling has always been super appealing to me, so I love that. I did find the movement to be really clunky in a way that's like, okay, it's 2011, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But that was my general thinking. How about you?
Yeah. Replaying this. I played it on the Steam Deck and I actually ran into a similar situation with the puzzle where the on the Steam Deck, like for whatever reason the controls are kind of wonky and the mouse, the cursor basically was not focusing on a single row and it kept like skipping between them. So for the first puzzle, I was just trying to like speed push and like flip things as fast as I could and like beat the controller. And then I learned you can actually do a trackpad situation and I fixed it. So I had my own puzzle struggle.
Oh, the puzzle strugs.
The puzzle strugs, yeah. But playing this was really interesting because it's a game that I had such strong feelings for and I knew that I loved. And revisiting it again, as I talked about at the beginning, it was just really interesting to say, like, I can still really love this while also simultaneously recognizing the things that I don't love about this. And that was very, very interesting. And getting to just experience the story again, it was just really cool. And experiencing it with other people, because like talking with you today, I'm still like the commodity of it. I'm just like still on commodity right now. That like totally just blew my mind. But being able to hear how other people are interpreting it in the forums and Discord and discussing it. Just as a side note for everyone watching and listening, because of my lack of preparation. I was hoping to hit folks up to ask to put their thoughts in and read out comments. And I just didn't have the opportunity. And we are not sharing folks' thoughts from the forums only because we don't want to do that without permission, because that wouldn't be right. So just know that in the future, if you do participate, like we'd love to have and include your thoughts on the discussion questions, because we pretty much loosely went through all of the discussion questions that the newsletter is based on.
Yeah, so like I guess I think two programming notes. One would be we would love to have a part or woven throughout the podcast experience a chance to include your voice in these discussions. This was very much like the two of us just like talking through it, which is great for the first time, but we want going forward this to be much more inclusive of your voices. For you're part of this community, we want you to feel like your voices are being represented. And the other piece is being more inclusive in the actual voices on the podcast. So one of the things that we were talking about as we were preparing for this is like we're talking about a game that is dealing with disabilities and autistic people. And we didn't have anyone from that community that could be a part of this first podcast episode. And I think going forward, we would love to have voices from these communities or anyone kind of come and be a part of these conversations. So, I guess those are kind of the two programming notes.
And we'll probably like, it'll depend on the game and it'll depend, like we'll probably settle in first with like just us two, but we're hoping to try and include folks as much as possible. So
things to look forward to.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else to close us out for this first episode.
Let's talk about how we build excitement for games to come.
How do we build excitement for games?
So, you mentioned at the beginning that at the beginning of every month, we'll be sending out information about the new game that's coming out, the first round of study guide. That is a overly homeworky way to talk about our discussion questions. Your study guides. One of the things that we had discussed was doing kind of a reveal where we watch the trailer together and our reactions to it.
I forgot about that.
And the tricky thing will be between us, like figuring out like brand new games versus games one of us has played and the other has
Mhm,
not,
mhm,
etc. But I think it's one of the ways that we would love to engage with all of you is to kind
mhm.
of share trailers and like share our reactions to trailers
Yeah.
before at the beginning of the month before we've got a chance to
Yes.
dive in.
Yeah, we'll probably do those as, like, separate like, probably tied to the announcement of the game. We'll probably have a recorded, like, reaction anticipation video,
Yeah, yeah.
basically. We will work on that. We need to do that
I think this is like we're trying to give you
now.
the
We need to do
foundation
this.
of where this whole experience is going.
Yeah. I would say just for context for folks listening in and watching, we're recording this um in week 3 of sort of the 4-week cycle that we have. So we're doing this before everyone's seeing the Act 3 discussion and the
Mhm.
discussion questions. So um what our hope is that we're going to give this to you and send it out with the newsletter this coming Tuesday so that you have this to help inform the hangout that we have at the end of the month. And so yeah, in between that and also the announcement videos, we'll figure out timing.
Yeah.
We'll do that offline.
Yeah. And we'll also be asking the community for their experience with the timing of things so that we can make
Right.
adjustments. I think the most important thing, I want to be very clear here. Jenny is doing so much work to make this happen. I know she's joking about not being prepared. She has a whole vertical screen
Oh
right
my
here of
god.
like guiding questions. So we're not going to buy into that. Jenny is doing a ton of work, and I'm just trying to be supportive. And we want this community to be supportive as we move forward. And so, if you have ideas or things that you would like to
Mhm,
share with us, like we'd love to hear it. Like one of
mhm.
the things we want is to make this feel like a communal space.
Right. Yes. I think one of the hopes, because my apprehension, I almost didn't ask for the podcast. I had to convince, well, I didn't have to convince you too
I
hard.
was ready.
Yeah, you were ready. But when I was reconceptualizing this, I initially thought like only newsletter, only Discord forums. Like we're not going to do a podcast. We're not going to do anything like that because I don't want people to feel like they have no ability to be like leaders in a space.
Hmm.
And I feel like sometimes when there's podcasts, it's very easy to say, oh, well, they're doing the podcast. So I'm just going to listen and not necessarily feel empowered to participate in certain ways or do certain things. But I found for myself, um, I just also really wanted to hang out with Joel. So selfishly, there's that. But also, I felt like it's really important to model the kind of
Yes,
conversations that
exactly.
we can have. And I think it's really important for anyone who maybe is doing this more on their own to have something to listen to help, again, just like emulate that sense of like being in a coffee shop. So hopefully if you're listening to this and you're not in the Discord and you're just doing this on your own, this feels like a moment where, hey, I've got friends in my ears that are talking and I can think through this as they're talking too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah. That's it for our first episode. I guess, do you have places where folks can find you that they can keep up with you? Are you
Uh,
active on social?
Man, relatively active. So my handle's my Granfalloon, GranFalloon. I'm on the Discord chat. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm not on Twitter anymore since the whole Elon Musk thing, but I'm eager to get to engage with you all, and it's just being a lurker on Discord for the last couple of weeks as we've been prepping for this has been super fun for me.
Yay! And folks can find me on my personal channels at Kimchica. I'm on TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube primarily. And you can find me recommending indie games and doing video game things all over the place. And of course, you can find me in the server. Right now, we're housing the Geeks and Grounds server like kind of embedded in the Kimchica's Cafe server, mostly because I was like, I don't need another Discord server in my life. So if you do join Kimchica's Cafe, you can opt into the Geeks and Grounds, and that way, yeah, it just helps organize it a little bit.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's it for our first episode.
And we gotta find a tagline. This was our issue like 3 years ago
I
too.
know. Well, we'll have to figure this out. We have a good intro.
Yeah,
I feel like the intro's solid.
Geeks and Grounds, percolating and grounding you in the brew of life.
I think
I
that'll
think that's it.
that's
We got
it.
it in one.
The brew of life. All right. Well, we we should just come up with a different one
I think
every
every
single
week we're
time.
gonna like on the fly. Yep,
Yeah.
you're up for next month.
All right. Well, that's it for this month. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for
Bye.
listening.